I'm so excited that today we have Marlous Teh here. And I know Marlous for a little while, but I'm so curious what else she has to share because I think she has a lot to share. She is a certified leadership mindset and energy coach. She also is a TED speaker on the topic, the cost of fitting in, which we definitely will have to talk about. And she's a facilitator, and it couldn't come to a better time because she actually has been um, an announced that she is the general manager of the Ingenesis Coach Academy, which we're both associated with in a sort of partnership function. And I think, oh my God, I'm so excited that you are now the general manager of that coaching facility academy. And congratulations. And yeah, so let's start here. Obviously, you have a background in marketing and events. You didn't start out as a coach. And my first question to you is, Marlous, what inspired you to become a coach?
Mm, Such a big question.
Yeah, we
Um,
love big questions.
yes, no, I actually do remember that when I was doing my bachelor's degree in university, um, I had the opportunity to have what was called at the time a career planning coach or a career study journey, study trajectory coach. This was in the Netherlands where I was born, so yeah, I think the translation in English would have been, to study your career trajectory, support your career trajectory. And I had a coach, and that was the first time I really experienced the power of receiving coaching
Oh,
because I was amazed by the results that I was able to get with this partnership that I had with my coach and the accountability support. And I basically I don't want to say overachieved, but I achieved so much that I had not anticipated without having this coaching support. So that was sort of my first glimpse, and I think that really ignited this spark that I
mm,
have for
mm,
coaching. And yeah, I suppose from there on, I was actually studying business administration at the time and went on to, really set myself up for success in sort of the corporate and business world. So ended up after doing my master's here in Australia in commerce, ended up being, more in the marketing and events and business development space, where I basically have most of my corporate working experience, if you like. But it was throughout that sort of 10-15 year period since, that first spark or ignition of coaching that coaching just kept coming my
mm.
way. It just had this beautiful way of finding me. Um,
And it wouldn't
I
go away.
No, it wouldn't go away. And it's because at the time, and this is interesting, at the time when I experienced this, career support coaching, I had thought to myself, could this be, a career or a job? But at that time, there wasn't much out there. There were no
Mm,
known
mm,
coaches in the profession, or at least in my world. And I was really focused because I was and have been, really ambitious and career driven throughout, for as long as I know, actually. And so my goal was really set on, no, I'm going that trajectory. And so I'm going with it. But then when I was in Australia, after completing my master's, I started running my own marketing and events agency for a little while, supporting mostly small business owners and entrepreneurs in helping them with their business development. And one of my clients, they were running basically a coaching consulting firm.
mm.
And through them, I was running their marketing and their business development. And through them, I got again in touch with coaching to the point where I had a really great partnership and relationship with with my client, and she saw a potential in me. beyond my marketing and business development skills, and actually one day said, would you like to support me in coaching, this coming client? And then through her, actually, my flame for coaching started to ignite again. And because, again, my focus was more on the marketing side and I was really building my, small agency at the time, coaching was a really fun, engaging, powerful way to do this work. And I felt it was really meaningful and I could see the impact and the transformation it had the clients that I was working with under the framework of my client that I was then leaning into. Um, it wasn't my main focus. And so even then, I was still mainly focusing on my thing in marketing and events, business development. And then it wasn't until throughout that time, I was also developing myself as a leadership development facilitator for community organizations like Rotary and Initiatives of Change. And I started to become a mentor and even a coach, sort of, naturally, organically, with the conferences that I was running, with workshops that I was running, with community service programs to support emerging leaders and young people who wanted to make a difference in the world. And through that, my coaching flame began to ignite again
Yeah.
and again. And it was this little spark that began, in that moment in my university. It sort of gradually started growing whilst I was still having, I would probably say, relatively successful career in
Mm,
marketing and business
mm,
as I was going
mm.
on that trajectory. And then I met another coach at a conference who she was just running a workshop and taking us through some coaching exercises. And there was something about this beautiful coach that really inspired me and ignited me and sparked me. And when I looked her up after her session, I had seen that she was a qualified life coach, a certified life coach with a particular academy, ICF accredited, and yeah, a few years later, I actually went on to study with that life coaching academy to begin my coaching journey. And that sort of came to fruition when, in my corporate career, when I was ticking all the boxes of success in terms of
Yes.
having the lifestyle, having the money, the status, the opportunity to travel, the praise and all of the things that I was working towards throughout my entire life, so to speak. Um, and I came at this point where I sort of felt, is this it? Is this the pinnacle of my career and life? And yeah, I realized I was really craving for more meaning and more purpose and really impactful work. It wasn't that I wasn't doing impactful work or meaningful work in my career, but I just felt there's something more for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was parallel with my, I suppose, sort of more volunteering, um, you know, trajectory of being a leadership development facilitator and, mentor in those transformational programs with those community organizations alongside, my corporate paid work, that I realized that I wanted to somehow marry the two together if I could, have that could that be my livelihood? And so when I was craving, yeah, when I was at that career crossroads, I thought now is the time to do that life coaching course. And
This is, oh, sorry to
yeah, no,
interrupt. I just want to highlight this journey and the point that you arrived, because many, including myself, got to this point where we had, I would say, had a beautiful career, and there will be many listeners also of this amazing career, beautiful careers, and then there's something knocking at their shoulder, as in, you know,
yeah,
and it doesn't always mean a complete change. It can, like you, it can mean that you're marrying the two, which is really important because it can look quite scary to look at what I'm on this trajectory, and there is coaching constantly coming into my face, into my life,
Yeah.
and you obviously also married the two, so that's really good to understand. I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
It's yeah, exciting. So you got to this crossroad.
Yeah, I got to this crossroads, and then I realized that instead of having sort of a more corporate focus in my, 9 to 5 career, so to speak, I wanted to pivot then into charity work, paid professional charity work. So I went into corporate fundraising for a little while, and then at the same time qualified as and certified as a life coach with an ICF accredited academy. And I, from there, just gradually started to
Mm,
build my coaching experience and
yeah,
my, practice and my business as a coach. And yeah, I did that for a number of years before I then officially jumped ship from my corporate career and then stepped into coaching
yeah,
fully.
yeah.
And
But
um,
that's it's
yeah,
also really good to understand, you have not abandoned your previous career, and the skills and experience that you collected there, you taking this with you. Then you've added a certification. You kind of went through a gradual process and integrated it into your life. And then you jumped. I mean, as in, sounds
yes,
like jumped ship, but yeah, you kind of jumped ship. But
yes,
it's to understand that there can be, a gradual progress and process behind it before you actually say, okay, I'm a coach now. That's it. Yeah.
yeah. And that is so true. I'm actually very grateful for that transition period because it enabled me to really, firstly build my experience as a coach and then firsthand experience the purpose and the meaningful work and the impact I was having with clients in my coaching alongside my 9 to 5 career, which then through the relationships that I had in my corporate career, corporate fundraising, and then, from my career before that, that really enabled me to continue to expand, my
Yeah.
coaching practice. And
Yeah.
my first paying clients all came through that network and those
Beautiful.
relationships, So
Yeah.
and I think that's so essential as a coach, is, as you're just starting and emerging in becoming
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
coach, is to not think that it's one or the other, but rather it's maybe more a deepening of your
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
or an
Yeah.
expansion of who you are. That's what it was for me, definitely.
Mm.
And so
That's
yeah,
beautifully said, because whatever we learn in life on our way, everything is of value and can be used. It's not about
yeah,
abandoning something and then digging deeper, connecting on a deeper level. Because I think
mm,
a lot of people these days, they are looking for this deeper connection. There's nothing wrong with working in the corporate, nothing wrong with having a career, um, but a lot of people feel there's a little bit missing, a little bit of my soul is missing. So you've just sort of gradually brought that in. Um,
yeah,
and what I'm also um, sort of interested in is when you've also had this TED talk, that's always very fascinating to have done a TED talk. So and I love the topic of the TED talk, the cost of fitting in. Um,
mm,
yeah, can you talk a little bit about, how you got to become a TED Talk speaker? Because I think a lot of people may be interested, how do you actually become that? How do you go about it? And also about your presentation, the content sounds very interesting.
yeah. Thank you. I have to say that it was really sort of a pinch me moment and in a way, a dream when, firstly, I saw the call for speakers for this particular TEDx event. So the event I spoke at was the TEDx Cecil Street in Melbourne, in Victoria. And, like most TED events, they would have like an overarching theme or umbrella that, you would submit a topic towards. And I have to say that there was something really unique about me going through the whole process, even from seeing the call for speakers all the way through to submitting my application, that I must admit I put off until the very last minute because, there was a little bit of hesitation in terms of could I, do that? And yeah, but, here we are and I got accepted. Um, the talk that I did, The Cost of Fitting In, was mainly about my lived experiences as a second generation Chinese Malaysian Dutch born, woman turned Australian international student and, resident.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, it was through some of those lived experiences where I'd realized, with some of the identities that I helped and resonated with me, um, that I was confined, or that, the ways I was um, sometimes being, how to say, yeah, the way I was treated, sometimes was very questionable, even from the smallest things of like, how I'm looking and what people perceive me, who they perceive me to be, or how they perceive me to speak, and how that can come out in this very interesting dynamic and interaction. And it really showed me, that we have this lens of how we interpret the world, and then there are these social constructs that are
Mm.
created, and then there are, dominant narratives and culture that can dictate these kind of interactions, and sometimes they can, be quite challenging and even painful. And
Yeah.
so my lived experience was around that, particularly in where some of these identities I felt, I was being quite oppressed in not feeling restricted in, being able to fully be myself. And yeah, from my upbringing, as my family migrated, from China and Malaysia to the Netherlands, um, there was always, sort of, I guess, an undertone of, appreciating this new opportunity that we had when my family settled in the Netherlands. I was born there.
Mm.
To really ensure that we make the most of these opportunities that, this country had to offer, education, work and business and entrepreneurship for my family. And so there was always this undertone of, ensure that you are, being seen in a good light, or that you're
Right.
perceived in a way that it is going to support us, particularly our livelihood.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so
A
that meant
very
I
sort
had
of
to,
a protective sort of mechanism of from on your parents' behalf, which is also understandable.
yes,
We're now in a different
yeah,
country, and and with their background
yes,
and their culture, just let's make sure that we're not stepping somewhere into a wrong
yes.
wrong bucket. But it
It
can
was
be
much
very suppressive.
survival for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was much survival for them because they, if you think about, their position, they gave up their entire life, all that they knew, their culture, uh, to go into a country they didn't even speak the language of, didn't have, apart from some family members there when they, settled there, they had to start,
Yeah.
from scratch. And so there was this, necessity for them to be able to, you know, fit in to the community rather quickly to ensure
Mm.
that their livelihood was supported. and also, in the context of assimilating as, as an immigrant into another country.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was really sort of the way to be for them. And so that was instilled in me. And so I had just realized that in my unique position, it was as if I was straddling sort of, multiple worlds sometimes between, being brought up and raised in the Dutch education system, all of my friends and people who were close to me, even in proximity, being raised and brought up in that culture. And then at the same time, also having my own cultural background, Chinese predominantly, in how we were doing things. And then there was sometimes this way of we can do these things, eat this way, speak this way, sing this way, talk this way, but maybe not, not always out in the front or in the open, because sometimes that was looked upon, or, even all the way from, food or things that we appreciated, it could be looked upon differently. And so I'd always known that there was sort of this, multifaceted way that we sometimes had to be to protect our livelihoods.
And that
And that
that
was,
will also
mm,
resonate with many people, also especially in Australia as a multicultural country. A lot of Asian
yeah,
people are here. And it's sort of, as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, I was born at the Dutch border. I have some Dutch background. See, I have a little
yes,
when I
beautiful.
when really
Yeah,
I put it out there just for you. So
thank
I
you.
understand the Dutch culture, and I haven't been in the country, in Holland for like 20 something years, but the Dutch culture at that time was quite liberal. Um, and
Yes.
and then China, and it's interesting, my great uncle actually lived in China for 24 years, and he left during the Cultural Revolution. So there's a connection to China as
Oh,
well. And
yeah,
we have some Chinese sort of artifacts in our drawers from him. And yeah, and I understand a little bit. The culture is so different, and then you kind of trying to integrate. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I can imagine that that's not an easy thing to do.
No, definitely not. And yeah, definitely I experienced that throughout my upbringing, being in the Netherlands. I went through my bachelor degree there. Then it wasn't until I came here to do my master's in Australia. And I noticed there was this same pattern, the same phenomenon happening here. And again, because my identity was, coming from this the Dutch background, but then, you know, I look the way I look, and so sometimes those stereotypes and things I would still be experiencing here to some extent until I opened my mouth, and people sort of assumed that I would have been brought up here, or,
Mm, mm,
and and I noticed there was a difference in how I was treated, especially even among my peers, particularly when I was studying in my master's, and I had fellow students who were from, for example, China, and they, were born and raised there, and they were coming to study here, and how we look the same essentially. We have the same skin color, same hair color, but I was getting different treatment than they were. And so I just realized that, throughout these experiences, including in my own personal relationships, even in my, personal circles and friendships, where I had noticed that these things could come up quite subtly, and yet
mm.
they didn't feel right to me at all. They
Right,
they
right.
felt really quite jarring. And at the same time, they were so accepted. It was so accepted for someone to ensure that they fit into a dominant culture, whether it was a workplace. And later in my coaching, I found, a number of my clients were also challenged with, this phenomenon of fitting in
Wow.
and,
Yeah,
putting on a facade or a mask of, who they think
yeah,
they need to be in order to be more accepted or to belong. And so, yeah, that was all of these experiences created this culmination of me then seeing this as a phenomenon that needed to be spoken
yeah.
about. And
That's
from
yeah,
my,
yeah.
yeah, so from my perspective, I presented and spoke about that as the cost of
That's
fitting in.
so. I mean, I think it is a very, very relevant topic, and it's not going
Mm,
to go away because cultures are there, and we are sort of mingling more and more, and people are migrating to different countries, and still,
yeah.
I have my German background, and that will never go away. I'm now living in this country for like 28 years, and I still, have a German streak in me. And I also find that is a positive thing. I find that different cultures is very, engaging, and I'm always excited to go to different countries and understand their culture and what they eat and or sort
Mm,
of the way they think. And I remember when I came to Australia 28 years ago, when I started my first
mm,
job, I was sitting next to a Chinese person, which in Germany at that time was almost unheard of that there are Chinese people. That's not discriminating, it's just Chinese people didn't find their way to Germany. And I was sitting next to her and we had conversations, and she had such a different view on life in some areas. And I was stunned. It just gave me
mm,
another level, another perspective to look at. I thought, wow, that's incredible. You can actually look at something like this. I don't remember the instances, but I remember that she really stunned me with the way she was thinking, and it opened my
mm.
eyes. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, there is such a richness in, really embracing our uniqueness. And that
it
was
is.
actually, at the heart of my TED talk as well, that I
Yeah,
really
yeah,
wanted to emphasize that we are leaving so much on the table if we keep accepting for people to fit into a dominant narrative, a dominant culture, um, and, that order change. And even
yeah,
in, like you articulated, in this globally connected world that we live in, still to this day, there's still some work to do
yeah.
on
There
that end.
is, I think, a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
I can see, and in some areas, the people have really sort of acclimatized to this and are really more open to integration in both directions, the receiving
Mm,
country as well as the people who migrated. And
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's all, I mean, that's a very interesting topic and it is so relevant. Also, in my coaching, I find sort of leadership coaching with people who are in business and corporate. They also, don't
Mm,
want to often speak up, and they feel
no.
suppressed, but in a way they got to speak up and learn that and express it, because it creates also so much other miscommunication, misunderstanding, and then sort of
Mm,
we're not effective anymore. So it seems to be a very human, deeply seated fear that we want to fit in,
yes.
and I think we had to, in our evolution, we're social beings, we had to fit into the tribe, because in the early days, if you don't fit in, your life is at stake if you're alone. So we're
Yes.
not wired to be authentic. We're wired to be social, and I think that is a great, not in a positive sense. That's a big hurdle to take. Um,
Yes. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that TEDx talk experience
Thank
that you
you.
shared with us. And yeah, it's so inspiring to speak up and do that. And yeah, I'd like to shift a little bit the course sort of to another topic. As you are very heart centered, and I can tell from the way you speak, it's just, oh, I think Maluz is so coming from the heart. It is embodied in yourself, and I feel it with everything that you share. And you
Mm,
bring sort of this heart-based coaching and also motherhood into your professional life. And I want to talk a little bit about that, what that
yeah.
means to you and how that is showing up in your coaching practice.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Motherhood, um, motherhood really cracked me open. Um, I I mentioned that I gradually made the transition before I fully stepped into coaching. And so when I was pregnant with my daughter, who is now 3.5 years of age, at the time of this recording, um, I knew that the um, the way I was working and living before I was becoming a mother. So I was, working in my 9 to 5. I had arranged things to ensure that I would have space for my coaching, as well alongside that. And when I became a mother and I was on maternity leave, I had thought that I would go back to that rhythm
Like so
of
many.
work. Yes, like so many, parents, aspiring parents, even that I would work my 9 to 5 career, continue to build my coaching, and and work motherhood around that. Very quickly, when I had my daughter, and I was on maternity leave, and initially I took 6 months, then I took a year off, and I had realized that m- my being was changing. Um, and I said my heart really cracked open because it did expand me in the most unexpected and abundant way. Because I felt that for the first time as a new parent, especially, it was like I got this, I lifted a part of the veil of life where I got to see and experience and witness the true abundance and one of the joys of life of being a mother and a parent. And um, I just knew that, you know, in being and becoming the mother that I was, I could not go back to my corporate career.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it at the time when I was even on maternity or taking maternity leave, but it was sort of more this gradual, it was more a whisper when I was on maternity
Yeah,
leave.
that's
And then, yeah, in um, dealing with the challenges of dealing with, having a newborn baby, being sleep deprived and all of that. And then, that's one spectrum, and the other spectrum, just the incredible joys of, witnessing life and growth um and yeah, I knew something had to shift. And so I started some conversations with my employer at the time. They were so beautiful in supporting me, and it was ultimately coming down to me in terms of what I wanted. And uh, eventually, I had decided that I would, because I could have chosen to work instead of 5 days, 4 days a week, because the role that I was in was quite a demanding
mm,
role. So I couldn't do less than that. Um, and and I still thought, I don't think I can go back, because something in my axiology, in the way I valued things in life, and the priorities that I set in how I wanted to spend my time and energy and effort had just shifted. And that was something that I knew it was through becoming a mother and stepping into the journey of matrescence.
that's actually a really important point, I find, also for the young listeners, also specifically women who look at, when will I have a child or will I have a child? And the focus on career has been put in such a foreground, as in being a mother is not enough, which I personally find is a sad view. And I
Mm,
think we both smiled a little bit and at the point where we said, "Oh, before you have the baby, you think that you go back
yeah.
to work, like in 6 weeks or 3 months," and we're laughing because then the baby is there and the life just shifts. Something shifts in you, and I've also experienced this. And I think and also both of us are, an example of you can have children and you can work, but in the sort of in a balanced way. You cannot have the full-on corporate career when you have little children. And I think there is sort of a misnomer out there in the world that this is, oh, we can just do everything. And
Yeah.
just being careful about these thoughts. And and the thing is, once you have a child, you realize how precious and how important it is to give the child adequate attention, and then things change. I think that is very important for younger listeners to understand. It is not something to disregard with and put a career
Yeah.
above it. You can always pick up with a career. You can't pick up with the children, when you've sort of missed your time. It's very hard. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for really articulating that and creating that for the audience because um, that definitely was something that I did not um, when I said it was really unexpected, this was one of the biggest shifts, particularly from a social, cultural, and even economic perspective of my, as part of my identity and how I'd woven, like I said before, I'd seen myself as this ambitious, career-driven woman throughout my entire life from the moment I
yeah,
started studying and being on that trajectory. And then becoming a mother completely shifted things for me
yeah.
to the point I just, could not have anticipated that. And one of the things that um, is quite foundational in making this shift for me was I had to decide and choose what kind of mother I wanted to be and what things as a family together with my husband what things we wanted to create in our life, particularly when it came to our daughter and having a family and being a family. And so, um, stepping away from my corporate role, because I did have my coaching business, in a way made it, I don't want to say necessarily easier, but it made it sort of more straightforward for me
Yeah,
that
yeah,
my coaching work was so purposeful and meaningful and impactful and was able to support me and sustain me in a way that it made sense for me to do that if I wanted to be the mother, the type of
mm,
mother that I wanted to be and have the time, the flexibility that is something that a 9 to 5 couldn't
yeah,
cater
yeah,
for.
yeah.
Um, and at the same time, I also want to be quite intentional about and responsible about sharing that is, and it still, to this day has its own challenges of
Of
how,
course. Yeah,
running my own coaching business and, you know, doing motherhood with that. But it's a very uniquely designed, consciously decided way of doing it. And that to me is really precious because I choose to, for example, um, a number of my clients, they work in the corporate space or they are based overseas or in different parts in a different time zone, that I get to work with them at nighttime. And I choose to do that so that I can, during the daytime, be a mother and be with my family. And not everyone, may like that or prefer that,
mm,
but that is
mm,
how I chose it to, along with some support structures that I have in place. I mean, I'm skipping through a lot here because we won't be able to cover everything. But in essence, it's, yeah, just really being really conscious and intentional about that decision of, career can move around
yeah,
motherhood
yeah.
and matrescence, but I realized it couldn't be the other way around. I
Right. It's
couldn't. construct motherhood around a career that was fixed in a 9 to 5 that required sometimes 40 to 60 hours a week, or, you know,
Yeah.
um, and then what
And I
capacity would
love,
I have left?
oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I love the way you also earlier mentioned that you consciously decided the type of mother you wanted to be. And I
Yes.
think that's such an important decision. And I think maybe the decision really matures when you actually have the child. And then you think, oh, what is the type of mother I want to be? And then crafting sort of, your career or your professional life around it. And that is
Yeah.
possible, but it has its challenges. It's not going to be easy. um, and
Yeah.
I think this is so important. I find this topic so important because I find it is important to have children. It seems to be, in our human
Mm.
soul that we would like to have children, at least most of us, and that the career doesn't have to be taking a complete back step, but it needs to be kind of carefully crafted around it, and that is possible, but
Yeah.
it is challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think, you know, when my coaching flame was ignited, and, kept growing and sparking, I knew that that was going to be, my purpose in a way, in terms of the kind of impactful work and meaningful work that I wanted to do in this world. And so I consider coaching be a vehicle for the work that I do in the world. And when I became a mother, it was also that I knew that that was my not even role or responsibility. It was sort of this, um, both incredible privilege and calling and opportunity to fully step into life. And
Mm,
I saw it in a way as a challenge to be able to make motherhood work in a way that, like I said, that would really support, the type of mother I wanted to be for my child and what she needs and the kind of family that I wanted to have and the life that I wanted her to be able to have. And finding different ways, new ways, pathways to build
mm,
my career and work around that. Because right now, as you asked me, how is this integrated into my coaching? Um, I, balance for me is, I would probably say for me, my work is more integrated into my life
yeah,
because I
yeah,
really focus on, the life that I want to create as a human, as a mother, as a wife, as a partner, and my work revolves around that. So that means my working hours would revolve around motherhood and this season of motherhood and
yeah,
what it asks of me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and at the same time, because of my personal journey going through, the journey of matrescence and that, complete identity shift in all of those areas, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, culturally, mentally, energetically, that I also decided to expand my coaching skills in supporting, or at least being able to support myself as a mother and understanding deeply the sort of changes I was going through within my being and all of those layers of identity.
yeah, yeah.
So that now I'm also in a position to support other, career driven, ambitious women. And I actually work with some parents as well
It's
who,
beautiful.
maybe going through a similar phase. And of
Yeah,
course, it looks uniquely and different for everyone,
that's right.
but there is a
Yes.
deeper understanding of, what it really takes to consciously make those decisions
Yeah,
and then the
yeah,
challenges that may come from it. And so, yeah, that just has added more meaning to my work in a way. It enriched my coaching work. And yeah,
Yeah, I love that you bring this to your coaching and that, you have clients who are in a similar type of situation and you help them because, as I said earlier, there's been such a distortion of this, superwoman
Mm,
archetype that's been sort of conveyed in society. Oh, I can do anything. And it probably comes, from back in sort of uh,
mm,
days where women were suppressed and they couldn't do it. And then it kind of went the whole other way. Of course, if you're interested in a professional career, you can do it, but you can't maintain a 40 to 60-hour work job, um, highly
yeah,
challenging with a small child without the necessary support. Someone needs to be there and support it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for us, there were, a lot of smaller decisions that would sit underneath that, looking at indeed like what type of support structures are available if I did choose to stay in my corporate
Yeah,
career. And
yeah,
so we are fortunate to have some support from my family in law. But my family, for example, they are overseas. And so,
yeah,
and then of course there are other institutions like daycares and, or nannies or other ways to be able to support,
yeah. Good.
that family type
That's right.
structure.
Yeah, there's not
Yeah.
just one way. And I mean that's so such an important conversation. And I think
Mm,
before we finish today, I have sort of this final message around, also motherhood or parenthood in
mm,
general. And you've done this path in, at least what looks like a very sort of elegant way. And I know there were many hurdles and challenges on the way, but it looks like you've kind of, gradually moved all into it. What would be your main message to um, a a person who wants to become a parent, regardless female or male, what would you give them as a main message if they have to juggle, or want to juggle work with becoming a parent?
yeah. Um, I find it challenging to be in that position to sort of give any recommendations. I'm thinking about, for example, my own journey and how I got there in terms of consciously and intentionally making the decisions that I and actually we did as a family with my husband and even my, my in-laws in the support that we are now having for our daughter, our family. Um, it actually is it's a decision way beyond logic.
Very good.
It's actually way beyond logic because um, when we decided that we wanted to have a family and we went on, we started that journey, there were a lot of logical things and decisions that we were making throughout that process. And initially I was only going to take, I say only, but I was going to take 3 months of maternity leave. It was my CEO at the time who said, she said, because she has children on her own, she said, you need to take more time, at least 6 months. And then I did that. And then because we have the opportunity to extend it, I extended that to a year. And that was sort of that gradual opening of, oh, what I thought, before being in that situation actually doesn't apply once I get there. And
Mm,
so for me, it was this gradual expansion. And that's why I said it really cracked my heart open. Motherhood really cracked my heart open. And I know that it does even for, other fathers and many parents in a way. It changes you. That, if there are things that you feel called to in your heart, or there's sort of a deeper knowing, whether that's a really strong sense that you get, or a very tiny whisper, I would say follow that and get curious about that and explore then in your world what the possibilities and the options are available for you to actually,
mm.
create new ways of being and living and doing. Because one thing I'm learning through parenthood is you just can't plan and foresee and control how things go, without the necessary misery. And it is already challenging enough as it is, if you
Yeah,
can make things work as
yeah,
smoothly as you can. Um, yeah, I would really encourage people to follow their curiosity and, really see beyond what they think is possible and really beyond logic and go out there and have a look at other people in terms of what is possible in what parenthood alongside career might look like. If you're someone, like me, like us, that you're ambitious or career driven, and yet you still considering parenthood, but you may think that it might have to cost you your career. Well, there are ways to go around that.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
you and I are examples of that, but it can take many forms. So
yeah.
this is sort of the thing is, it doesn't have to just look one way. There can be many possibilities if you're willing to follow your curiosity, be open about that. And yeah, essentially follow your heart as well.
That's very beautifully said. I love obviously following your heart, but I also love the aspect of curiosity, and being open. And
Mm,
mentioned also earlier, and I can attest to that myself, is the world really changes once you have a child. When it is the first one, the second one, you know what's coming, but
yeah,
the first one. So be prepared that the world will change in a way that you wouldn't expect, which is also beautiful and it can be challenging. But you
yes.
spoke a lot about expansion. It will be expanding your way of being and enriching it. And I love that. I mean, we really come to the end of today. I really love the conversation, Marlous. You
Mm,
absolutely are an ambassador of the heart, I would say. I love
mm,
how you navigated the changes in your life and being a mother and kind of sort of integrating things and look at things and the difference you can make. And yeah, so I want to really thank you for taking the time for this podcast. And
mm.
any final message that you have that you'd love to say that you haven't expressed before we close off?
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much, Jacqueline, for having me. It was really such a beautiful conversation that we got to have, and some took me on memory lane, which, thank you so much. And I hope it's been valuable for your audience. And yeah, look forward to staying connected. Um, I actually, as you were sharing and recapping the last part, I just thought there's one thing that, if I were to recommend something is to really surrender.
Oh,
To have deep trust and surrender because
yeah.
when I say it's beyond logic, um, it really requires a level of surrender. And I think for me, um, even though you articulated and said, oh, I did it elegantly, there were many parts where it was not so gracefully and not so elegantly. And I remember those moments really well because I was just fighting against what was there for me or what was possible, and I wasn't surrendering and trusting enough. And when I say
Mm,
surrender and trust, partly it was myself, it was the people around me, but it was also life in general.
yeah,
And
yeah.
once I did that, it actually unlocked a wave of abundance and richness in my life that I now get to experience on a day-to-day basis. And this is why I said, motherhood gave me this opportunity to look under the veil of life to actually
Yeah.
see like what's the deeper level to go before I was a parent. And so trust and surrender.
Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Yeah, thank you so much, Marlous. And
Thank you.
I wish you all the best. And I'm sure we are connected. We stay connected. And I will see you when I see you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.